Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to be a part of our community, head on over to missionmatters.com/community. All right, so I am so thrilled and excited to welcome back to the show Mintele Nash, who's the founder and senior UX UI designer over at Minty Fresh Designs. We've been working on this book together for, I don't know, the last year or so, and it's finally out and into the public, into the universe. First off, hey, I just want to say welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Adam.
Oh my gosh. So we got a lot to talk about. So overall topic and theme, mental health and empathy in the workplace. We'll talk about the book. So mental health is the driving force behind the success of your business or product. And we will also get into, of course, what you're doing over at Minty Fresh Designs. But before we do all that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all, with our Mission Matters Minute. So Mintele, we at Mission Matters, we amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. What mission matters to you?
Well, currently the mission that matters to me the most is promoting mental health and a good environment, like healthy environments in a workspace, because I think it makes a long-term difference for either collaborations or employees you have, and especially leadership, because I feel like that affects a lot, or I should say establishes a lot of the environment that we work in on a day-to-day basis. And if that's a healthy place to be, then we'll all flourish. I feel like in our personal lives as well, since work is such a big portion of our daily lives.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I want to maybe go a little bit, and thank you for sharing that, of course. But I want to go a little bit further. And again, there's a lot of different things that you could have written about, right? There's a lot of different things that you could have contributed to the community and to the book. Why do you feel like bringing awareness to mental health issues, specifically in the workplace, was just such an important topic?
Well, for me, just based on my own personal experience, and maybe I've just observed this a lot in the tech industry. I know that's not the only industry that these issues exist in. But this is one that I've personally lived my life in a lot, because I've worked at various tech companies before, and I work with a lot of tech companies and just a lot of different types of businesses in general. But when I was working full time for some other businesses, I just noticed a lot of the influence, and in this case, I would say negative influence, unfortunately, of not having mental health be a priority. And when I think of that, I think a lot of things like kind of like lack of emotional intelligence, or just very demanding environments that, I guess I would let me elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like there are times where projects or things are demanding of employees, like if we're rolling out or launching a huge new feature or a new product or something like that. That makes sense. Every once in a while, we're going to have stressful times or more demands put on us while something is happening, right? Or we have a big deadline to meet. But I've seen it where it was just it was a chronic daily thing, which I feel like people can survive that for a short period of time or live through it. I don't know, is survive the right word? It is, but I feel like it gets to a point where it does turn into literal survival mode, and then life in this sense, I guess your work life becomes very heavy and just it's a lot. And I've seen the negative effects on that, and it's even worse when it comes from top down, with leadership, because I feel like they influence so much of the environment that their employees are in. Or I've also seen it just even in my work life before, when I felt like I didn't prioritize my mental health. So I was working with partners or clients or, different people, and not necessarily having the healthiest of relationships with them, or just kind of tolerating stuff that wasn't good for me. And sometimes we don't even notice that that's what's happening at first. I would point
Yeah.
that out. Like, I feel like it takes some time. Often mental health is like being affected, or physically we start to see symptoms, or just realize we're not functioning as well as we used to, or not thriving as much. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum where I myself have not been functional, like, or I got to that point at a previous job that I had before, just because like the environment was not great. I've also done that before in my own business, where I think I was just taking what I could get because I didn't think that I deserved better, or that I could have more success than I was having. And so I tolerated a lot of garbage, to put it lightly, I guess.
Yeah.
And but I got to a point at one point in time, like I had some hard life lessons that forced me to change a lot of that. Cause I was like, I don't feel like people should have to live like this all the time just to have a paycheck. Like, I don't believe that that's what we're meant to experience in our day-to-day lives. Like, of course, like not every day is going to be perfect, but when it feels like, when we're not, like, it's more than just like, oh, I'm tired and adulting is rough sometimes and I don't want to go to work. It's more than that. It's like when it feels unpleasant to be in that work environment. I guess that's what I'm driving at, is that we can promote some of that change. Like, we may not have full control over, especially if we're, if some people here listening, you know, if you aren't the leaders at your business or whatever, but I feel like if you work on changing yourself, or at least speaking up whenever possible, or setting boundaries and not tolerating negative behaviors, I think that can help a lot, because we can get really drained. And I just think of the long term. Like, I think in the short term, like I was saying earlier, we can survive that to an extent, or we can live through it. But once you get to that point where you're just not functioning or feeling different, or it's just like, it's really hard to be at work and draining. And like, for me, I've felt a lot of different, like, literal physical symptoms based on this. But when you're at that point, like, it's really hard to recover. And for other entrepreneurs, I'd say, out there, or leaders, like, you have a higher tendency of losing a lot of good people you could be working with. Not just good people, any people, but like, the worst is when you're losing good employees or good partners or good people, because you're burning them out because of unrealistic expectations, or not prioritizing like people's mental health or their well-being. I think there's a good balance, you know, between kind of pushing that a little bit, but like, I don't feel like we have to be extreme. Like, I don't think you even have to be anywhere close to extreme to have like good relationships with people, or treat people better. Because like, if you foster a good environment where people feel like they're cared about, they'll work hard for you. I think that just comes naturally, and people enjoy working in those kinds of environments, and you'll keep people for longer. And people, or even if they're not your employees, or they're your clients or partners or whatever, people will work with you for a long time, or you'll also want to work with them for a long time, instead of having to feel like you have to convince them to stay, or convince yourself to stay, if you're like in that position where things just feel miserable on a daily basis. Like, I don't know. I feel like we're meant to enjoy life. Like, life's not going to be perfect, but like, if our mental health is just like crumbling, like, it's not worth it, in my opinion. And so, I don't know, having lived through a lot of that negative stuff in my life, I just feel like I don't want to watch other people go through that for like no reason. I think we can change things, but sometimes we're unaware, or we think we can just work our way out of it somehow. And sometimes like we can't, we just have to make changes. So I don't know.
And so one of the things that you do in your, and thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that you do in the book is you share some ways for people to kind of like establish maybe a little bit more balance, whether it's, exercise, mindfulness. I mean, you go through a lot of them. Maybe talk a little bit about the solution and maybe some of the things that are under our control, whether you're, one of those leaders or if you're working for somebody as an employee. Like either way, there are some things, and that's where I got a lot of hope out of your writing and just even out of the tone and the sense of it. So maybe again, tell us some of those tools we can walk away with.
Well, the first thing I want to point out is just a reminder to everyone, I guess, is we can't control what other people do. I know that's annoying sometimes. So
annoying.
the first thing we have to remember. I mean, it's hard when we can see that things could be better or could change, right? But like, the only person we really can control is ourselves. And so when we focus on ourselves, I think the first key is just awareness. But I talk a lot more about kind of practical ways of things we can put into practice that for me has helped me in my life develop awareness. I feel like first off, if we don't have awareness, we can't really improve ourselves, or we don't know what needs to be improved or how we can improve. So I feel like I've done things like try to be better at prioritizing like a work-life balance. And what I mean by that, I know we hear that word a lot, and a lot of people probably have different opinions about it, or what does that mean? But for me, and it's taken a lot of practice over time, is making sure that I actually take time out for myself, especially as an entrepreneur. Before, I was very, very inclined to just work 24/7, like all the time. And I knew I had just kind of like subconscious, like trauma stuff that I haven't dealt with in my life, which I think kind of created that behavior in me. But as I worked through a lot of that stuff and started prioritizing, like, it's okay. Like, this is me talking to myself. I'm like, you don't have to be working all the time, like all day. Like, I functioned well doing, however you want to define well. I did that for a period of time until like I crashed and burned, basically, because I thought I could just do everything and it didn't matter if I didn't take breaks or not. But when I started prioritizing my own personal life and like my own personal time for myself and like developing hobbies, or it's not like you necessarily have to develop a new hobby. Like you can if that's what's right for you. But even if it's just like going back to things that you enjoy, or just making time for that stuff, or even you don't have to be spending a whole lot of time like actually doing a whole lot, but if you just carve time to just rest and like recharge, I think that's really important. Because eventually, I can attest to this just from personal experience. At some point, even if you're okay right now, you will completely burn out at some point in time, like if you don't do that for yourself. And so once I started doing that for myself, I think I started being aware of my own needs. And it was actually weird that I used to think, oh, I have to work like all the time to be successful. And if I don't, then I'm going to fail and everything's going to fall apart. It was interesting once I started prioritizing stuff like that more, and like taking care of my body and exercising and different things. Like, I actually started to see more success, and I wasn't having to kill myself in the process of doing so. Which was like, maybe for some people that comes easier to them. I don't know. But for me, like, I really had this belief before that I had to work myself to death in order to be successful, or to have any value, or feel like I was a good entrepreneur, or even just a good person, probably in general. But now I actually believe the opposite. Like, you don't actually have to, you shouldn't have to kill yourself in order to be successful. Like, I think we can, like, work doesn't have to be our entire lives. Like, I guess power to you if that is what it is for you. But I would like to think that we can equally enjoy our personal life as much as our work life, and still have our businesses and our work life like succeed and thrive. Like I believe that for all of us. And I think when we prioritize both, like we actually become better professionals in the workplace. Whether you're a leader actually running a company or managing a team, or whether you're just a regular employee working for someone else, or maybe working with other people, clients or something like that. I think sometimes we get it backwards. And especially I feel like in this hustle culture, wherever this came from in our society, like I don't think we need to do that. Like, I don't know. I feel like we get bombarded with a lot of negative messages that actually negatively affect our mental health. And we don't really realize it because we think we have to be doing this or we have to do that. Like a lot of the times, my genuine advice is just like, it's listen to your body and what it's telling you. Like, are you burnt out? Like, okay, then figure out how do you need to take a step back, or what do you need to do to recover and rejuvenate yourself and like feel better. And because I think if we're just constantly burnt out all the time or not putting our needs, like I think there's a fine balance of knowing how to prioritize your needs, but also, you know, like your work needs and stuff. But if work always comes above your own needs, then you're prone to severe burnout at some point in time, or you're going to be angry a lot of the times, or you're not going to enjoy the day to day, or you might struggle to get up and actually do your job or work with people. Like I've been there, been through it all. I have a lot to say about a lot of things, but I just feel like the burnout is like, it's a hard lesson to learn, but like we can avoid it if we're careful and just aware and in tune with what our body is telling us and actually listening to it and obeying it.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about bringing you on the show is that, especially to speaking to the tech community, because a lot of your words and things you say, like you don't hear come out, in my opinion, or at least in media, from the tech community enough. Like we a lot of media glamorizes this idea of like working constantly, and you know the American way, right? Like that's pretty much how it's been, I think, misconstrued. But I love bringing you on here to be that other side, other voice, that other thing. Like even for myself, like you give me permission. I'm like, wait a minute, when's the last time I took a break or let myself have some time to kind of just be, right? Because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially those that are pretty like just day to day into their world or their bubble of entrepreneurship, they forget, myself included, I'll pick on me, that hey, there's more to life than just your work, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is there's going to be a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, just people, right, that'll watch this. How do you know, or what are the kind of the telltale signs that maybe it's time to readjust and you're going towards either whatever word we want to use, burnout, time to take a break, whatever the word is or whatever the state of being is? Like, are there some warning signs that let you know so you don't have to go all the way over the edge? And maybe if they watch this, they can be like, oh, I get it. Like I need to maybe reassess some things.
Yeah. First off, I would definitely like to point out the signs are going to be different from person to person because everybody's bodies are different and what we've been through is different. So I can speak to my personal experience, and some of those things might be the same for other people, might be different, but I can speak to my experience and things that I've also seen in just like my work experience over the last like couple decades. I know some of the big things for me, at least. Well, okay, so I'm like thinking of a big time that was like the sign of when it was like so obvious to me that I needed to change a lot of stuff in my life. And at that point, I was experiencing an extreme amount of fatigue, like not just like it's different than we have some days where we wake up a little tired. It was chronic. It was ongoing. And I felt like no relief even after several nights of quality rest for like, you know, normal times, like 7-8 hours of sleep, you know, like the recommended times. And I wasn't feeling like any different. I remember feeling signs of dissociation
Mm.
and brain fog. Like I remember working at one job before where I was in such a stressful environment and I
Mhm.
didn't feel this right away. Like I felt it months like down the
Wow.
road, even though I could like I guess that's another thing. I guess before I get into that, now that I'm thinking about this,
Yeah.
it was like sometimes we just have a sense that something's off. Like whether it's how we're being treated at work, even if it's maybe not like blatantly in our
Mhm.
face, like in the very beginning, and it can get worse over time. I've
Mm.
experienced that too. And sometimes it's learning to just trust our gut with that.
Yeah.
But for me, I remember not really listening to that, and
Mhm.
so it got to this point where I was having this chronic fatigue, feeling dissociated all the time. I was having brain fog. Like I remember since I work in tech and I do a lot of
Mhm.
product design, like talking with developers and development team and product managers and stuff and having meetings and having to
Mm.
report daily on what we were working on, like what we had completed the day before, what we were
Yeah.
going to do the day of. And I remember like it was so bad for me that I couldn't even remember what I'd done the day before. And I never had that problem
Wow.
before.
Yeah.
I was
So
so
that's
stressed out.
significant. Like you literally then from day to day were like, wait a minute, what? And you'd never experienced that before, right?
Yeah, I was always
Mm.
like a really hard worker. I was always
Mm.
doing all the tasks. Like, so it wasn't, I knew for me, it wasn't me being lazy and be like,
Yeah, of course.
to like come up with something to report. Like, I had a log of what I did,
Yeah.
but most of the time I could remember just off the top of my head. But I was
Mhm.
having to refer to lists in my notes. And because, I mean, we had
Yeah.
software that tracked all of the tasks that we were doing, and we would mark what was in progress and like what was
Yep.
completed. And yeah, I couldn't remember. Like I might remember like one out of like 15 things that I had done.
Wow. Mhm.
And that was like a huge sign to me that I'm like, I am so stressed out right now. And this is an external sign for me that
Mhm.
I'm not doing well,
Yeah.
and me having a hard time focusing on stuff. And I've never been one that's had a hard time focusing,
Mhm.
like unless I was like super sleep deprived or something on.
Mhm.
I don't think that we have to get ourselves to that point
Mhm.
where we are falling apart. Like I remember feeling like my body is not functioning well, like I'm having to push through the day, like yeah, it was pretty bad. And I
Yeah.
kind of had to take a step back from a lot of stuff, like cut back on some hours that I was
Mhm.
working, and at that point, like in my life, modify some of my work setup or how I was
Mhm.
working for for this company, and actually switch them to being like a client of mine so that I could like prioritize
Mm.
my health. But it was really rough. Like I would not recommend anyone letting themselves get to that point. Like unfortunately it
Mhm.
happens sometimes because I think
Yeah.
we can just keep going through it.
Mhm.
I like to think it does. Well, I know it doesn't happen to everyone, but I know there's a huge tendency, especially in the tech
Mhm.
world, like I know in the medical world, burnout
Yeah.
is like a real severe thing. And I feel like even just one of the simplest signs is when we, even before it gets really bad, if we just
Mhm.
like subtly start to feel like we feel off, like we don't
Mhm.
quite feel ourselves. I feel like that in and of itself is a sign, um, to just kind of be careful
Yeah.
that maybe we need to make some adjustments. Like, and sometimes it's hard to know what exactly the adjustments that need to be made, whether it's speaking up for ourselves
Mhm.
at work and trying to make some changes, or whether it's just, I would say, taking some time off. But I would like to be careful and say
Mm.
sometimes just taking like a few days vacation or even a week is not necessarily what fixes all of that, especially if you're at that dramatic of a point.
Yeah.
If we do take breaks, I would like to like counter that though. I think if we kind of get ahead of the game and make sure that we are taking breaks and like having a mental vacation where we're not feeling stressed out all the time, that can help. But on the flip side, like if we're constantly in an environment or doing things that are triggering our mental health in a negative way all the time, like we're still going to hit burnout. Like I can point that out. Like I remember thinking like I could take a million vacations, but like this isn't going to fix the problem if I'm constantly in an environment that is going to make me feel like this. So sometimes we have to reevaluate, are we in an environment that is not, if we are in charge of the environment as leaders or in charge of the people that we work with, I think we have to evaluate as well. Like, is this worth, sorry, I'm trying to think of like how to word it. Like, is it worth what I'm doing? Like, from happening to people that I'm working with, you know, because we have a lot of influence in that regard. And when we're actually aware of how other people feel, then we can positively influence that. But I've been there in environments before, unfortunately, where like the leadership, I don't know if it was just like lack of awareness or they just didn't really care. And it was hard because I remember like seeing them lose a lot of good employees, like including myself, just because they were promoting this like environment and culture that was leading to burnout for people, and people were very unhappy or just like couldn't keep up with the demands. So I think if we're just kind of more aware of that, and I know sometimes it's hard, especially in the tech world, because we're always trying to launch new things and new features and make money and be successful all the time. And I think there can be a healthy balance, and sometimes it just takes some evaluating of how to like prioritize those things. Like, how do we get these things done, but without killing the people that are working with us or for us? And I know that could be tricky, and that requires some hard conversations sometimes, or getting out of our own heads and thinking that we know better than everyone else. And I think that's often the hardest one, is sometimes we think we're so much smarter than everyone else when we might actually be contributing to someone else's mental health in a negative way. Like, I think we'd rather be on the end where we're influencing people positively, right? And so I think sometimes it just takes some courage to say, oh, hey, maybe I need to change or do something. So it can either come from that, from a leadership perspective, or it can come from just inside ourselves. Like, the healthier we make ourselves, then we start to make healthier choices. And then you can decide, am I in a good environment? Is this good for me? And I was the one that just needed to stand up for myself or speak up for myself a little bit more. Or do I need to make changes as a leader to make sure that people are happy here, or people enjoy actually working with me? And so I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and it's easier. I was going to say this. It's easier to know the signs of changes in ourselves, like once we become more aware of our bodies. And like, I've had to do a lot of different things, from exercise and meditation and stuff like that, to even recognize the signs that my body was telling me, or to have the courage to listen to what my own body was trying. And it's taken a lot of practice. So if anyone's listening to this and being like, I don't even know how the heck to like, how do I know what my body is telling me? Like, sometimes it's a lot of practice, honestly, I feel like. But there are simple things like that where I'm like, are you chronically tired? Are you like angry and frustrated all the time, like for no reason, when generally you're not that way? Like, do your responses change to things, or are you also experiencing brain fog, or you just can't function, or, you have to know what your body is telling you. But those are things that happened to me, and it still can even happen to me, or I've had it happen. Like, I don't think it's just a one and done thing either. Like, we have to keep practicing this and knowing how to stand up for ourselves or just tell people like, hey, I need a break. And I've done that with my own clients before where I could tell that I was hitting a rough point, and not that I had to like necessarily stop all my work all in all and just like put a huge pause on my business. Sometimes I might take a week off to just be like, hey, this isn't even like a vacation. This really is I just need to rest and reset kind of like break to just get me back on track. And I think that's okay. And if you have healthy people in your circle, whether in your professional circle or personal life, like the right people will support you in that and like help you get back on track. I just want to point that out. So that's also another sign. I feel like if you are working with people or there are people in your life who you're expressing these concerns to and they have a negative reaction, then that's probably a sign something needs to be changed as well. Like you don't want to keep surrounding yourself by those kinds of people who don't want to promote your mental health or support it and help you get, to a good place if you are struggling. So sorry, a lot of things I could say about this subject.
No, and what I love about it too is that you provide like for people that watch this, like especially that are going through it or or see it approaching like and need a break or need to kind of reassess some things. That's what I love about doing this is that getting these stories out kind of gives people permission. It gives people permission to be people. Really, is what it comes down to. We're not robots out here. Like we do have feelings, we have needs. We are all different. So I love your perspective and kind of giving us all permission out there to kind of reassess and rethink some things. That being said, I do want to spend a moment or two with the time we have left here. I mean, Minty Fresh Designs. I mean, tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
So with my business, the primary services that I provide are UX, UI, so user experience and user interface design for products and software and websites. But I do website design as well and some development and also branding services. So I like to take what I have learned just even from my own life lessons, even if it's not just burnout or whatever, but I feel like a lot of what I've learned just in my own life has cultivated the skill of empathy and just understanding other people. So this has been nice because not only is that just like a thing that I've lived through and just like this real life skill that I feel like I have just with social interactions with people, but it's a very practical way that I get to put it into design, which I actually love. Like I've always just been a creative person my whole life. And I know user interface design is not necessarily always the most creative outlet, but it's together with kind of a problem solving aspect of it. So, there's the interface part of it, but the actual experience part of it and trying to learn what's frustrating people, what people are liking or what their needs are is something that I genuinely love. And I love doing this and I like solving problems for people and figuring out like how to make users happy is just, it's a thing that I enjoy doing on a daily basis. And so I like that I can provide that service for other people, whether it's for a software or an app or a website or just helping go through, revamp a lot of stuff or help people fix their marketing messaging. Sometimes that's what I help do too in terms of design and layout and the user experience and even just understanding that. So it doesn't always have to be as complicated as diving into very specific features of the software either. So I enjoy all those aspects of it. I think it's very fun getting to know people and talk with people and interact and solve problems. So that's what I enjoy doing.
Well, that's great. And the type of businesses you work with, so small businesses, mid-size, like what kind of projects do you normally like to take on?
I tend to work with a lot of small businesses. A lot of startups do tend to like to work with me as well, but I work with a variety, even different agencies I've helped out as well, working for their clients and doing a lot of different things. But I love doing all sorts of projects. So I've helped startups just from the ground up design brand new software, and figure out all the headaches and problems and stuff and research that comes with doing that when you're starting from the ground up. But I've also helped other companies who've already been established and maybe they don't, like, I'm just giving examples here. I've worked with some companies where they have development teams like in place, but maybe not necessarily a lot of designers, or maybe no designers at all. So I'll come in and help revamp a lot of the stuff. Because I'll point out developers think very differently than designers. And that's the benefit of having a designer like me come in, because I can see, I'm not downplaying developers. I love developers. They think the way that they do for their skill sets. But I kind of am like a middleman between like developers and the people, or users as we call them. And so I'll come in and maybe fix some features that have already been put in place because they took an attempt and tried to build a feature or an application or something. And I've done that plenty of times before, where I basically come in and audit that stuff and then redesign it in a better way where it like makes sense. So that's something I've done a lot too, whether it doesn't necessarily have to be the whole entire project or software application. Like it can come in and just look at a particular feature that is struggling, or they see that like this could be better, but what are we doing wrong? It's because like we don't have a UX designer in place to do this. And I've done that a lot of times for websites. Well, like some people take a stab at building their own website and then it's like maybe not performing as well as they want, or it's not making sense. Like I had one client before where they like, it is basically a startup company or a small business, and they're trying to launch and make this app, bigger and better and try to get the word out and people signing up for the beta and they can test it out and get like more feedback on it and stuff. But the software like wasn't necessarily making sense in terms of what it did or how it would benefit them like on their website. So I've gone through and done things like that where I just do a big audit and then redo it all and like help them fix the messaging so things make sense, or highlight different features that can go through and like help try and drive better traffic to people's websites, and so that things make sense, but not only look nice. I like to emphasize like, of course I like pretty things because I'm a designer, but I like things to actually be usable and actually helping a company make a profit or get more business, or have it function and not just look pretty. Of course,
so it can be both,
but I want it to be functional. I don't want to design ugly things either, but like I want it to be usable and making a difference for the business, because there's a lot of people that can make stuff look pretty, but if things don't work, then like what's the point? So
great. And if well, first off, I just want to say it has been so much fun having you back on the show, of course. And then also, I mean, this is the beginning, is the way I like to look at it. We've been working on this book for, I don't know, the last year or so. Now it's out. Now this is the beginning, is when you start promoting and getting out there talking about it. So I'm excited to go on this next part of the journey with you as well. But that being said, I mean, if somebody wants to follow up, learn more about Minty Fresh Designs, or just connect or follow your journey, I mean, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can go to my website, which is Minty Fresh Designs, but it's MYNTI Fresh Designs with an S.com, like my name. And so that's an easy way to get in touch with me through contact forms or just looking at my portfolio there. But you can also find me on Instagram. My handle there is just Minty Fresh Designs as well, spelled the same way. So those are easy ways to get in contact with me, or look me up on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. And we'll put all that information into the show notes so that our audience can just click on the links and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters or engaging in an episode, we're all about bringing on business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, and experts, and having them share their mission, the reason behind their mission. Like, why do they do what they do? Like, what gets them excited to go out into the marketplace and make a difference? If that type of content sounds interesting or fun or exciting to you, we welcome you. Hit that subscribe subscribe button. We have many more mission-based individuals coming up on the line, and we don't want you to miss a thing. Mitali, oh my gosh, it's been so much fun having you back here. Thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and to get the word out about this book. So thank you.
Thank you.